Hey guys, and welcome to the latest podcast. Thank you to all those who voted on the new name for the podcast. You spoke and we listened, and these will be called the SleepyTalk podcast from now on. So once again, thank you for that. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. If you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Ryan, friend of Luke's. Met in our travels in vape, which leads me nicely onto my plug. I make e-liquids, TGWD, the best ones out there. That's enough.
Yeah, I'll leave a link to that in the description for you. No worries.
Thank you.
So on our podcast today, what we'll be talking about is witches, and more importantly, the witch hunts back from. And I've lost where the date was. Was it 1700?
Yeah, I was going to say 16, 17 were about the... I think the Salem ones were 1700s, weren't they? But it was a little bit before that it kicked off.
Yeah. I mean, we do all this research, and once again, I've
disappeared.
I've focused on the non-important stuff, and so hang on. Yeah, so in the 1600s. So in the 1600s, during the late 17th century. So I'll start off with the Salem witch trials. So just a quick cap over it. The witch trials in Salem began when there were two girls started to have fits, and they claimed they felt they were being pinched and stuck with things, and basically there was mass hysteria after this because the girls blamed their condition on witchcraft.
Got out of hand. That's all I can say.
It got well out of hand. So during this, people were just throwing accusations out at anyone, whether they liked them or not. And basically, the church of that time, I think they were Puritans, which is a sect of paganism. You'll probably let me know if I'm right on that one.
If I know, I will. Don't worry about that.
So when the church got involved, they put people on trial. If you admitted to being a witch, then you were imprisoned. If you denied being a witch, then you were tortured and ultimately killed. So I think there was about 20 people that were executed for being a witch in Salem, but there were a lot more trials going on around different places around that area, around different districts. But Salem seemed to have the most deaths, and that includes in prison as well.
I think it was 20 people hung.
Yeah, 20 people hung.
In that one little place.
Yeah, there were a lot that were drowned, I'm sure. So 20 people were put to death, but there were a lot of people that were tested to see if they were a witch.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers that coming back to me, thinking about it now, I want to say thousands, but I don't know if that's the case, because I did, like I say, I ended up just looking into the witch hunts and witch trials in general, and the numbers were ridiculous. But I think any more than one is just by today's standards anyway, a bit crazy. But yeah,
it
lots
was,
of people.
It was really stupid. Like, but you've got to understand this was in the 17th century, so there were a lot of things that people didn't know. And the tests, what they use, I'm just reading them now. So the touch test, the person afflicted with fits would become calm when touching the witch who cast the spell on them.
Yeah, that's just asking. It's almost like somebody's put that test in place because they know there's somebody they want to set up.
Yeah.
Like, basically, pretend to have a fit, mate. When they come over, just stop, and I'll sort you out with some of the land that I'm going to nip from.
Is there a time, like, if someone was genuinely having a fit, so let's say it was an epileptic fit or something like that, the time that they have that fit can be half a second to like 10 minutes, maybe even longer, or maybe less. I'm not too clued up on epileptic fits, but there's no real time that someone has one.
No.
So they could literally hold someone that they think is a witch for X amount of time until that person stops fitting, and then say, "Look, we found the witch."
Yeah.
You know?
Is this was there a standard? Like, okay, you touch them, and
Yeah.
if they stop fitting within 30 seconds of the touch, then like you're a witch. But if it's after that, then you're not. Like, what's the? How do you? I don't know. Maybe I'm just really pedantic. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I don't think they would have had a stopwatch then.
I
Maybe
think, yeah,
they
I
did
don't know.
lunar
When we're talking
cycles.
about, I would have thought, dealing with somebody's life like this, they might have taken it. But then again, they're going on testimonies of children that are probably just making stuff up. Maybe, I don't know. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah. The next test was confession by dunking. So maybe this goes into sort of like the Halloween thing. So apple bobbing and things like that, dunking your head to get an apple.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I never thought that,
maybe.
yeah.
I mean, Halloween. Spooky
Yeah.
wooky, as we call it.
Ghost and stuff.
Yeah. So they dunk an accused witch in water until they finally confessed. So they could literally half drown someone until they're that desperate to stop being drowned that they just say, "Yeah, I'm a witch."
I mean, from again, like, a lot of my research was done just today. To be fair, other than just the stuff you do at school and what you pick up on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, don't really know too much about it. And I saw videos of the contraptions they use to dunk these. I don't know if it's true or not, if it's some people just playing, I don't know, but it just reminded me of something from children's TV where somebody from the losing team has to sit in a chair which gets dunked into slime.
Oh wow.
It's like a chair on the end of a big, like, long log that's just somebody's got some weight on it on the dry land, obviously, and they're just letting the weight off to dunk it. How? I mean, what? I don't know how to. I just think back on, like, what thought processes go through people's minds. Yeah, this is the way to do it. They're still human beings that had brains the same as ours. I don't know if we've evolved much, like in our brains since then, to think, to a point where we think differently. But I just can't think how something like that could have just ever been a standard. Yeah, they will dunk them, and is that like if they confess, or the drowning one, if they float, they're a witch?
Yeah. So with the drowning, so that was the submersion test. So they'd bound them and dropped them in water with weights. If they floated to the top, they were considered a witch. Now, if they were bound poorly, then they would have floated up, obviously. But then when they floated up, they'd then be hung.
Yeah.
So is it better to drown or have your neck snapped?
I think one detail I found out about that one says that it was like one wrist was tied to the opposing ankle. And they were chucked in. That was like the standard. Why put that much thought into that and not into how ridiculous the whole thing is? Like, what science was that based on? The opposing wrist to foot?
I don't know. There's a lot of weird superstitions with things like this. There was spectral evidence, which was literally, if you dreamt that someone was a witch, then they were a witch.
Yeah.
like if you've seen, could you imagine hating someone that much that you just go about and say, "Oh, I dreamed that this person was a witch," and hoping that you get there first before that person says that you're a witch?
Yeah. I mean, this is where my whole sort of almost conspiratorial mind needs to calm down a bit, because I'm like, this is clearly all just like some setup. Because there was almost like a classism about it. If people in higher standing were suggested to be witches, not in all cases, but in a lot, or somebody related to somebody of high standing was accused of being a witch, it would just sort of go away.
Well, that brings us on to sort of like the end of my segment when it's talking about this, before we have a full discussion on the stupidity of people in the 17th century, is that the governor's wife was accused, in which he then pardoned the rest of the accused witches and released them from jail, and then abolished the trials of witches.
Ugh.
So he was all up for it until
I didn't know this. I did. I've obviously came across examples of it. I don't recall hearing one. It's the governor of Salem. You mean?
Not of Salem. I forget which governor. It's not of Salem. It's of the larger region.
Oh, right,
I
right, right.
think it's Massachusetts.
Yeah. Massachusetts. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think I'd come across that one on my YouTube travels earlier, but there were other accounts because in Europe, like it was just nuts. Apparently, this um witchcraft or witch hunt season, shall we call it?
See, I've not
Um,
actually looked at anything from the UK. I mean, I know we live near sort of like a famous site for
mm.
which is it the Nine Ladies.
I, to be fair, like I say, other than the Salem stuff, I didn't realize until today how. So it's something I'm going to look into more. But Europe and yeah, Britain, we loved it, mate. But it seemed to be a lot more politically sort of fueled.
Yeah.
The whole thing sort of just like after doing my research, sit down like this is just like a trend that's
Yeah,
swept
it's mad.
the world.
I know
Yeah.
from what I researched anyway, in Salem, the accuser would have their friends on the jury. So, if you didn't confess, you were screwed. You were literally screwed. And if a judge determined that you weren't a witch, then the jury would think that the judge is a witch.
Yeah.
And then they'd...
Somebody needs to go in it, really.
Yeah.
We want blood. We want sort of a show. We want to see somebody get hung. Come on, sort it out.
Yeah.
One of you turned down. I don't. It's a different time, I suppose. Just. Do you think that's where the origins of the creepy little girls in like horror films comes from? Then
Maybe, given that
'cause
they
there's
were
a
the
lot of
ones
like
that started it.
creepy little girls whispering or singing in hallways is usually a scary movie trope, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just weird. I suppose when everybody's pointing fingers, the sane people start to realize that maybe this isn't a thing, and realize that innocent people were being condemned.
It's probably. I would have been horrible for it if I was around back at the time. Listen, I would have had to. I probably.
You'd have been castrated for it.
I would have been done. I would have accused everybody. Like I could have, and everybody would have turned around and got me first. Like I would have been terrible. I mean, I still refer to people today as pagans when they portray certain sort of behaviors that just seem really old school and crazy. Like I say, the whole believing in ghosts, spirituality, that sort of unexplained stuff, I feel could be left over from these times where the people genuinely believed it, like Christmas and birthdays and all of these sort of. If you take yourself out of your own experience of life and look at those types of things, they all seem pretty crazy and ritualistic. Yeah.
I mean,
Bring a cake on fire into a dark room singing a creepy song for someone's birthday. I'm like, that seems quite like a ritualistic type thing. Maybe that's something in time that we'll forget and look back on and think is crazy, like we do in believing in witches. And like, yeah, it brings them, good luck or something. That's why we bring them the cake on fire on their birthday. Where did that begin?
It's crazy though, because up until you said on their birthday, I thought you were talking about Christmas cake. Because they set that on fire and bring it out. So it's
yeah, they do that. Yeah.
So everything's a ritual.
Like the way I see it, birthday cakes were around before candles. Like, so set the cake on fire. I don't know, but like there are many things that are in today's society that go way back and based on a time where the general sort of mindset of the people was so far-fetched compared to today's standards. maybe ghosts and whatnot is ghosts and whatnot. That's another one. Are a part of that. It's if you don't believe, then that's a common thing in this type of realm, isn't it? If you don't believe in spirits, and is mysticality a real word?
We'll accept it.
Yeah, mysticality. So
Yeah.
it's like somebody's surname. Yeah. So circality. If you don't believe in that sort of stuff, you don't experience it.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe.
Is it, well, if you do believe it, you do experience it. Well, that could have been just everybody back in the day when this sort of stuff was rife. Everybody believed in it like we believe in science.
A bit like a placebo, really. If you believe it enough that you can have a placebo effect of you'll experience something, even though it could be a gust of wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you touched on it on the first podcast that I listened to, where obviously your brain sort of deciphers what the eyes claim to be seeing. If you believe something, if you've got it swirling around in your brain that these types of things are possible, why wouldn't your brain take that sort of information and use it in its decryption of what your eyes are sending to it?
Yeah, I mean, your brain just makes connections. So
maybe these accusations might have. I think by the end of it, it was a massive farce. But I think people realized that, didn't they? That could have been where it started. Perhaps one of the theories of how it started.
Perhaps so going back onto topic.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's great. I like waffling anyway, so it is great talking about different things. But going back onto topic, the last test that they did was called pressing.
Oh,
yeah. Before reading what pressing actually was, I thought it was just like make them go to the gym and see if they can lift a bit. But they literally put heavy stones on the accused, and that was meant to force the confession out. And there was a poor 80-year-old bloke called
the farmer guy,
Giles Corey, and I want his name to be in this because I want his name to be remembered for as long as possible. Poor 80-year-old Giles Corey was crushed to death when the test was used on him. An 80-year-old man had a huge heavy stone placed on his chest in order for him to confess whether he was a witch or not, and it crushed him.
If I remember correctly, he was the only male out of the Salem lot that got killed. The rest are all female.
Wow.
Yeah, because obviously that looking into the whole witches, like why were witches predominantly female, and that ties into the church trying to swap basically anybody that didn't want to swap the current like natural pagans believe that there was a certain female figure they believe represented something, and the Christians wanted them to take that particular female god, deity, whatever you want to call it, and swap it out for Mary.
Right.
So I can't remember what the connection was, but that was part of anybody seen with this particular god or anything to do with that seen worshipping it or something. But it was common amongst women. It was one of those ones that like female pagans were particularly sort of into following or believing in. So it was a majority of women that would be seen, practicing whatever worship to that particular god was. I can't remember the name of it, but very similar looks about them.
It seemed, from reading anyway, when it came down to it, the Puritan church, it was a political war, or a religious war, where they wanted people to confess for redemption. If they could get numbers on their books for redemption, they were seen to be the better church.
More money.
Yeah, so you admit you're a witch and I've forgotten the terminology now. Ask for forgiveness. and then you're part of our church now, and we'll help you to get rid of the witch in you. Which it was just a popularity contest. Who could get the most members?
Who's recruiting the most?
Yeah, and the fact that actually got governors involved, and the hysteria spread not just from round Salem, but from Salem to different areas. And like you said, if this was all over the UK and Europe, which I believe it was this from Salem, or was it just something?
Oh
that was...
no, it was in the UK and Europe before Salem.
Oh wow.
Yeah, apparently Salem was like sort of towards the middle back end of like the whole witch thing.
So yeah, there's the thing. What makes Salem so famous, we'll say, or infamous for it? If
that was one thing that I sort of questioned in my. I like to question everything. I'm like, stinks of conspiracy even more now, like, because it's not it's up there with one of the most. I think it was the second highest sort of number of like confirmed they were a witch, so they died, rather than how many people died in total. In one place, I think 20 was the highest or second highest, and that's why it's regarded. But it was. I watched a bunch of countdowns, as you know, YouTube educates through countdowns, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I watched a bunch of those. And Salem, in the the worst witch hunts, trials type countdowns, was always like top 5, but there were a few that beat it on a couple of these countdowns. And obviously, I forget the details of them. I literally, I've got a piece of paper in front of me, and it's got ghost stroke witches down, and I was like, write some notes, make some points, and there's nothing written underneath it. Yeah, so
to be fair though, I mean, I've tried to do this with writing notes, and I end up tripping over myself. I mean, I know I do that when I'm waffling anyway, but I tend to enjoy the conversation more than I do the points. So I go off topic.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, I go off topic. I spit a load of waffle, and then I get back on topic. And I always feel like I've done. Obviously, this is an amateur podcast. It's not huge. It's something that I do I enjoy.
On Spotify. You're a professional.
Oh, yeah. Plug in Spotify now. We're actually on Spotify now. So this episode will be on Spotify. I will leave a link in the description. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I've just been chatting about it for the past 2 days. But yeah, we're over on Spotify. So if you're driving, stick us on. Have a listen. If you're driving right now, I'm talking to you. I'm in your car.
Nice. It's also very, very good to mix e-liquids too, as well.
Not while you're driving, though.
Not while you're driving. No.
Not while you're driving.
Don't mix it though. But if you ever mixing e-liquids, pop the podcast though.
Yeah.
So, mixing listening.
Yeah, definitely. So that guy with dreads will be there'll be a link in the description.
Boom.
Yeah.
Oh no, that wasn't me. That's
another plug. That's another plug.
Yeah, cool. That was a happy accident. That one.
Yeah.
Trying to bring my crowd over to your Spotify.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate it. So, another waffle averted.
Yeah.
There's some interesting facts around the Salem witch trials.
Mm-hmm.
So you touched up on it anyway. That most of the accused were women, but some were men. A majority of people who claimed to be afflicted by the witches were girls under the age of 20. Which will bring me on to my next kind of topic, which is to do with the rye ergot, or ergot, or ergot, however you want to pronounce it, which is a fungus that becomes poisonous in rye. And this was around the time that people started having twitches, fits, hallucinations, and things like that. So, although it's not 100% confirmed, this was theorized to be a reason why the witch hunt actually took place. What are your thoughts on that?
That makes it. Sorry, it's quite funny. I just opened a tab on my browser, and I've still got Google witch hunts. So I was just scrolling down. It's that is the biggest sort of like this isn't witches thing for me. Like it just seems, especially now, in the midst of a pandemic, that's spread across the world.
That's
Who's not
Chinese witches, isn't it? Chinese witches doing that.
Wuhan witches.
That's such a good name for a band.
I actually wrote a lyric. It's like I get it spreading quicker than Wuhan, but I'm gonna have to wait a little bit, I reckon, before I drop that one in a track. But anyway,
We're gonna have to edit that out of this podcast as well. I'm not
sorry.
going to though.
It's alright. I'm known to be stupid and say dumb stuff. It's all good. But yeah, like I say, I think maybe if we wasn't in the current state of pandemic we are, or if that's what we are in rather, it wouldn't have occurred to me that if it's an illness, if it's something that's caused by a fungus in those times as well, it could easily like just have gone across the world. But apparently this was quite not exclusively, but it was common in the Salem area, this particular fungus.
Yeah, which it's just one of those, isn't it? It's like, is that just a cop out, or is it actually some sort of scientific evidence? Because
so when was it they found that out?
I don't know.
In
1976.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's that like? You're talking 60, 70 years after?
Oh no,
Yeah.
you're talking 200 and
16 and 19,
300
isn't it?
yeah, 300 years later.
Looking at the last two digits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just, I suppose that's just it, isn't it? Like as you get further away from sort of the belief systems, the mindset at the time, and science advances, it's sort of like getting further away from believing it squared. So obviously times change. We don't believe in things as much as we used to sometimes. So that's one thing taking points away from it for me. And then science comes in, which is, the standard of today's beliefs, really. That adds on top of it. I'm not sold, I'm afraid. I reckon there was some other agenda going on here.
Yeah,
Maybe not at the start, but by the end of it, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of believe that maybe that started the whole thing. So the two girls that were having the fits, and the fact that girls under the age of 20 were the majority of people that were afflicted by witches, and I quotation that. So maybe it's just that their immune system couldn't cope with it as well as what adults could. So
yeah,
know,
that's a common. That's like what we're dealing with now, isn't it? Really, it's been highlighted the elderly, and those with pre-existing illnesses. That's a common thing that are going to catch flu and are more likely to. Why can't something be more likely to hit? Or maybe, I don't know, that at the times the girls tended just to play in certain areas more than boys, and then that's where the fungus was growing more.
Yeah.
Say, there are many things we could look at now, but it just makes me think, like, why wouldn't it have been looked at the time? I know we've advanced, like, scientifically and technology wise, and being able to spot these things. Maybe the technology wasn't there at the time, but I don't know. Like I say, I think if I put myself back in that time, I would have come to other conclusions before witchcraft.
Yeah. That's just the sort of education that we've had compared to education in them days. But mass hysteria is an illness, and it is a contagious illness as well. It's a groupthink mentality. If somebody else is going crazy because they think that there's something dangerous there, your natural response is to find out what that dangerous thing is and get away from it.
I think somebody at some point in time had cottoned on to that, and found a way to sort of, infect it and it into people.
Oh, definitely.
Hysteria, and that's what I mean. the protests going on now, coronavirus, like just any of these major things. Madeleine McCann, I think it's just one of those. But obviously, back in the day, there wasn't the ability to communicate like there is today to squash certain things. Like if something like that happened today, there was some new sort of fungus going around affecting people that made people act in weird ways. Somebody might suggest it's some sort of possession, but we'd very quickly just stamp that out, not through any science, just through people, sharing that information, and enough people going, no, that's stupid. But as it happens slowly and through the means of authority, for what I mean, it's not just going to be the people at the time, the working class people at the time that were spreading this information around the world, because those people didn't tend to travel around the world. It was the sort of people with more well-off positions and positions of authority that are going to be respected enough to travel around and for whose testimony is going to be believed. And maybe that somebody cottoned onto that and thought, we could gain, because there was a lot of land taken from people that were accused of witchcraft and stuff, weren't they? And they were struck like, you've been accused of witchcraft, give us your land and the accusations go away.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Again, triggers my conspiracy senses were tingling. So,
which is a good sort of point, because in Andover, there were more people accused of being witches than there were in Salem. Now I think Andover was a bigger town, had a lot more land, and I'm probably wrong. At that time, I'm probably wrong, but I think I'm right in the fact that it was used as sort of like a scapegoat to get what you wanted, but you had to get in there first, because if somebody wanted what you had, then you were screwed. So
very similar to some sort of police forces in some parts of the world. They've got that sort of, whoever comes to us first is the innocent party.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's just a race to grass on the other person first, or just contrive your story and get in there first. And with that sort of thing sweeping around, how is it not going to get out of hand when we don't have the tools that we have today to communicate with each other better?
Exactly. And the things like this happening today, we're more in tune, or are we less in tune to it? I mean, again, that there could be witches. We touched up on pagan rituals and birthday cakes and things like that.
Well, do you know what? Quite funny. It's not quite funny, actually. It's a little bit off topic, a little bit on topic. But in my younger years, he says, I was very, very much wasn't a conspiracy theorist, but I just loved reading into them and finding out about them, much like you are with ghosts and this type of stuff. And it led me to these theories on the elite practicing sort of like child sacrifice and eating the flesh of children and drinking the blood, and those sort of crazy out there pentagram type theories.
Fucking awful.
Yeah, there are people that believe like there's a whole sort of elite culture that's surrounded that, and many other sort of disturbing sort of acts towards kids. But then this whole what's that guy that has got Prince Edward's in trouble, or Prince Andrew in trouble? It's got one of the royals in trouble. Some rich guy that's been found out just messing around with young girls.
It's not Epstein, is it?
Epstein, yeah.
Is it
Jeffrey Epstein, I want to say.
Is it Epstein? Because I thought Epstein was the guy that I'm gonna have to Google this. Who was the royal?
He killed Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew or Prince Edward, one of them. He's pretty much like got him in trouble. Have you not been keeping up with
Mate, honestly, stuff that to do with the royals and things like that. I know it's really bad of me for being
same
British, but I like we're gonna go massively off topic now, but the whole Prince Harry thing, great. I'm glad he left. I'm glad he's
fully.
happily having his life now, and that he's out of the media eye because of how his mother
So
was treated. You know,
this is my thing. I was like, 2020 has led me to believe that somebody from the BLM is going to find Maddie, right? Who was kidnapped by Epstein, right? And had authorities and whatnot locked down because that's how he rolled. And he had them locked down because he was bribing them. He had the families kidnapped and was feeding them chlorinated chicken. And Prince Andrew was found to be seen to be found out, and throughout all of this, somehow Harry and his missus end up on the throne. I'm like, that's how 2020 is going to go. That's I just want to figure out how Harry's going to end up back on the throne or back in the royal family after this.
I'm literally gonna have to put a disclaimer in here.
That's my theory. Sorry, bro.
I'm just gonna have to put a disclaimer in it. Like,
nothing expressed by Dreads in this is Luke's opinion. It's all Dreads, and Dreads is just a character. You can't come after him.
Dreads has got dreadlocks, so you can assume the ethnicity. Why he's talking about this. Okay, no, I'm just gonna put that out there. You can assume. Just a disclaimer: these are not my points. These are not my thoughts.
No, I'm happy to stand by my personal thoughts on things. I don't act on these things. I mean, I don't go out there promoting that the Queen is a lizard, but I might believe it.
But you must never say it. You can think what you want, but you must never say it.
Yeah, but like I say, when you go out there to this weird sort of that's the sort of realm of that sort of child sacrifice sort of realm of conspiracy, like is lizard queen type territory. So I'm like, it's an interesting read, but I don't know. I don't know, but like again, for all we know, it could be true. They could still do all these crazy sort of witchcraft. I don't want to say pagan as in like it's a pagan thing. I'm just like of that time, sort of rituals that could be done in secret today by certain groups of society that have money and power to keep it secret. Well, because they took advantage of the situation back then to gain from it.
I mean, what are the elite groups? I used to know them because I used to read up on them.
What do you mean, like the societies, the Freemasons?
The Freemasons, yeah, and then there's the American one, isn't there? And I mean,
the Illuminati.
That's it. Yeah. How did I not know that? So, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be, and please, if any of these organizations are listening, these are not my thoughts. This is just waffling, okay? Don't come after me. Go after Dreads. He's just a character.
I mean, if you need to edit it out and it doesn't make any sense, edit back in at this point now. It may not flow very nicely, guys, but that's my fault because I did my typical thing of saying too much. This is why I can't do live shows by myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like he does a live like 3 times a week, maybe even 5. But yeah,
I have a baby.
So it wouldn't be that far fetched to think that rituals, probably not as dark as this, but certain rituals are followed. I mean, look at colleges, for their in America. I mean, colleges for their frat houses, fraternities,
like Roman thing in it.
Yeah, they go through rituals for their initiation. I mean, that's the most basic form of it. There's no reason to disbelieve that in these elite groups, if they exist properly, as we think they do, that they go through initiations where certain things happen that may be not so great when it comes to actual general population, and the fact that a lot of religions have adopted pagan rituals. We'll say Christmas as a prime example. From reports of holy scribes and things like that, Jesus wasn't born on the 25th of December. He was born somewhere in July. But it made sense.
It's all based on Egyptian sun worship. Pretty much every of one of today's modern religions is, but that's another topic. Don't worry.
But yeah, it was based off the pagan winter festival or winter solstice, and then you've got the summer solstice. So why it couldn't have been in summer during the summer solstice, given it was July, I don't know. But it ended up being on the 25th of December, and that's Christmas, you know.
Capitalism.
So the fact that we have religions that adopt older religions, festivals, and rituals, and I say rituals as like a common term rather than an actual like child sacrifice. But you know, things. Let's look at.
Well, I like to use happy birthday, because if you just forget, you know, what you know of happy birthday, what you've been taught about the song happy birthday, and just listen to it. Happy birthday to you. It doesn't sound. It sounds creepy. It sounds haunting as hell.
Is it mad that I thought instantly that you were trying to wash your hands? You know, from all this coronavirus, sort of things, to wash your hands while singing happy birthday twice, and it'll get rid of the virus. As soon as you started, I was like, I need to go to the sink. I need to wash my hands.
Conditioning, bro. Conditioning.
I've been indoctrinated.
Or maybe even put under a spell.
Yeah.
Hi.
No,
on topic.
I hated being sung to when it was my birthday. I hated the whole process of that. And like, it upsets people when you don't like it. But when I was a kid, I used to hide under the table, and as soon as I was old enough to say no, don't do it, everybody looked disappointed. I was like, but just don't like it.
I haven't had. This is why I feel like it's almost sort of been in our culture for that long. It's almost part of our very being. I think my father's faith, which I don't really follow, with him being a Rasta, it doesn't really follow the Christian, Christmas and Easter and all that lot. Dirty Babylon, as he would call it. But I 16, 17, haven't celebrated a birthday since then. Got very upset when my current partner shared my birthday with other people, because now these other people buy me presents. People think I'm like Sheldon, where it's some pre sort of like, I'm not into the whole contract, I have to buy you a gift back and stuff. I'm like, it just doesn't resonate with me. I just don't see how, like, why it fits into how we live our lives now. I think it's something left over from back then. But you have to take yourself out of what you know about birthdays and just look at it. So it's, you putting candles on a cake, singing this weird song, bringing it into a dark room, loads of people around. It's just pretty sort of, to me, seems very creepy on the surface of it, much like the whole concept of witchcraft, cauldrons and sort of chants and stuff. Yeah, like sort of like these weird sort of set ceremonies where, like, even like similar to a wedding. If you don't have that sort of walk down the aisle, is it a wedding? I'm like, what is significant about that? That's a deep rooted sort of thing. Like, somebody could have a wedding and you'd acknowledge they were married, but if they didn't perform these certain actions within the ceremony, within the whole proceedings of whatever event we're talking about, like if there is no cake at your birthday, that's been deep rooted in us, and maybe practices of witchcraft, if they were real, were once one of those things that were just an odd thing that we did or certain people did, but it's been stamped out because it didn't fit with church's agenda, and they've put, history is written by the victor, isn't it? So these people, it might have all just been silly and stuff, and it all just went away by the end, but who's to say that's not how they closed the book on it and made us not believe, so it doesn't apply to us, because it only works if you believe.
Yeah, I mean, here's a good waffle. Well, it's probably a terrible waffle, But while you were talking, I were trying to make a connection in my head, and now I truly believe it. If you think about birthdays, when they originated, I don't know when they did, but I assume they were at a time where people didn't live that long. And the whole concept of singing happy birthday and celebrating someone's birthday was probably because they didn't have that many years. And the sort of symbolism of cake probably evolved from people getting sugar, because I know that sugar was very expensive like 100 years ago and
Yeah.
prior. Sugar was one of those, if you had rotten teeth,
Luxury.
you were considered rich. I
Big
think,
belly, no
yeah,
teeth. That guy's wealthy.
exactly. I think was it Henry VIII who had wooden teeth
Yeah.
because all his had rotted out because of how much sugar he ate and how much he
That
ate,
guy had everything. Had belly, had rotten teeth, had 6 wives, like
or ginger hair. These are not
had the
my
works.
thoughts.
Based on depictions of him that we can see today.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the crazier waffles that I've ever had, but in my head the connection makes sense. So maybe that's just something we've adopted, and that's why we get sugar for our birthday and people celebrate it. But when you're living to be, I mean, the average age now is something like 78, 79, maybe even longer for women now. 85 times being sung happy birthday to. It probably gets boring,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, for me, it ties into I believe sort of my not wanting to do birth, because like I say, I haven't celebrated birthday for a long time. I haven't celebrated Christmas. Don't do Easters. Avoid anniversaries for like things unless it's a relationship one, and I want to keep a relationship. I feel those sort of set sort of things that have a procedure to them. All sort of originate from the same place as like witchcraft. It was, and this whole scenario of worldwide mass accusations and stamping out and things like that was perhaps just one way of whoever at the time was setting the agenda just getting rid of it because it didn't fit their agenda. And to me, that's the church. Just like they did that with many other forms of life and ways of life, didn't they? They just sort of just waged war and everything that didn't fit the Christian or the narrative of the Christian crusades, isn't it?
The Christian crusades.
Yeah, so it's a very different sort of mindset from religion at the time, far more aggressive, just stamp out what doesn't agree with us. And sort of even to this day, we can see how certain ways of life, we don't think of them in an accurate way until we experience them firsthand. If we rely on the agenda set or rely on the narrative set by the people, setting the agenda or the narrative, the media, the politicians these days, the wealthy these days. Back then it was the church.
Yeah, I was going to say that the media now, but we're kind of evolving past the media. A lot of people are questioning the media because we have phones, we have
communication, like I said,
an ability to record things that the media don't want to show and that doesn't fit their narrative. We can put them on social media and discuss them, and a lot of people do still try and stamp it out and say, well, let's say, in fact, I'm not going to mention the newspaper because I hate them. But they're owned by an Australian guy who was kicked out of America and Australia and now resides over here and owns about 90% of the media over here. And there's a narrative to everything. There's
100%.
There's such a bias.
You can't really fault humans that are in a position to set sort of, shall we call it, mass narrative, for doing that. I think that's just a human thing to want things your way. I think we have to sort of think beyond ourselves, and it takes a very special kind of person or thinker to realize it's sort of a thing in movies. The bad guy a lot of the time doesn't really genuinely, it's portrayed as thinking that what they want is right. I'm going to kill everybody to stop all war. I'm like, okay, you're going to stop all war, but to them, that is gospel. That's what they believe, and that's what the media is sort of now. I reckon. I don't think it's sort of like the church was back during the witch hunts, where it seems to me they had an agenda. I strongly think it was the church and money that ran that whole fiasco by the end of it. Um, the church obviously being very you're not agreeing with it. So we're just going to stamp it out. The media these days it just doesn't cover it, rather than try to stamp it out. You know what I mean?
And I think it ties us perfectly back into the topic, which would be
Yeah,
mass
sorry.
hysteria. No, that's fine, because I waffled like mad. Don't apologise, it's good. But it does tie us back to the whole mass hysteria thing, where you have somebody or some organisation in a position of power that tells you something and you instantly fear. They make you fear something in which you then fit your own narrative to something else and make more people panic. So realistically, the witch hunts, yes, they were bad. We don't know what started them. It could have been the fungus. It could have been the church. It could have just been greedy people. But it seems like a lot of the times things like this, although there's not people being hung or tested to the way that they were like their witches, the history does repeat itself in some form or another with mass hysteria.
Yeah, 100%. I think like with technology and communication, sort of the hysteria surrounds smaller groups. Like the witch thing went all over the world. It would have been a slow progress. But before things can, gain momentum, nowadays, because of communication, there's something else. People ain't got enough time to spend sort of spinning that wheel of witchcraft, because there's something else nowadays. You know what I mean? Like I listed off all these events that happened this year so far. Maybe if the only exciting thing that happened so far this year was the Madeleine McCann thing, we'd all be very focused on that now, and that would be getting all well out of hand and be a mass hysteria type thing for some reason. But because we can communicate, it doesn't get as severe as the witch hunts anymore.
Yeah, and I think as well, just to sort of counter that a little bit anyway, is our lives up until this year, since social media, since we've been able to communicate the way that we have, our lives have been so fast. Everything, scroll through newsfeed, check up on people, check in on this, see the gossip, find out this, that everything is like snap, and we've been able to take that information in. As soon as this lockdown happened, I don't know about people from other countries. I imagine Europe will be the same. I don't know about America, because I think they've gone up and down when it comes to lockdown, but I'm not there, so I can't judge or comment on it. My life this year has slowed down so much that I don't know what to do with myself. I genuinely don't.
I'm lucky. I could just maintain the sort of what I've been doing. Just change up the times and don't see as many people. The only thing I've really missed due to this is the odd bi-weekly binge in town on the weekend. But what I find interesting is we're going backwards in sort of, you see more people spending time in nature.
Yeah.
Due to all of this. Everyone's doing the selfies, on walks and bike rides and things like that. And I'm starting to see posts of sort of people having these, I don't know what to call them, sort of epiphanies or sort of realizations. Yeah, of how sort of like mad and how detached from the natural being their life has become, to not sound so philosophical over it. Which I think is good. It's sort of like if you think of it in a progressive sort of sense, it's a step backwards, which we needed. But thinking of if we needed to go back, we keep going further back. Obviously, what we spoke about earlier with nature. The further back you go, the closer to the way nature would have wanted us to live we would have been. As we progress forward, we get further away from it, which ties me to that maybe there was something in this witchcraft because it was such a long time ago, and we only move away from nature, it seems. Then was the witchcraft thing closer to what we were supposed to be? Maybe.
Could be. Maybe these people that are in nature taking selfies will get fungal poisoning, and then people will start throwing them in lakes.
5G rays, mate. It's gonna be
yeah. No, I think obviously we've gone massively political and massively off topic, but it's good.
Yeah. See, sorry. This is my problem. Like I say, it's bigger. I always think of everything on a far larger scale. And where does it fit into everything? And the witch hunts, maybe if people had camera phones back then, would have been like a 9/11. It's all an inside job trying to get people to hate a certain group of people for political gain, because there was political and financial gain from the witch hunts.
I thought you were going to say from 9/11 then. I was just about to put another disclaimer in.
No,
These are not my thoughts. These are not my thoughts.
Oh, no, definitely not. No, I can't prove that, but YouTube has told me today that it definitely was in this one. So,
honestly, if you create a YouTube channel and talk about conspiracies, I will join you on some of these talks. And I think a few people maybe in the comment section will probably suggest that you do, because it has been entertaining. I'm very off topic, but very entertaining, and we've managed to link it back repeatedly. So that's the good thing.
This is what I mean. I just it gets me thinking. Like it's you've said earlier, history just repeats itself. It does. I mean, there are things that I learned today about the witch hunts as a whole that I could just apply to what's going on in the world today. And then that's what triggered this seems a bit a bit of a conspiracy. How can we not learn? This must be something somebody's put in. You know what I mean? Like, no way. Even back then, witch hunts. Come on now, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
By that point, in my opinion, but you don't know, do you? You don't know.
So maybe the message for this podcast is: if history repeats itself so much, how do we not learn from it? So we've had a lot to talk about, and well, we went off topic, but I think it was great. I think we've managed to sort of create connections with current events and these past events, and I don't know where we went with it, but it seemed enjoyable to talk about. So I think we're going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you to Ryan or Dreads who has joined me on this one, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll bring Ryan on to some more podcasts and we'll talk more in depth on different sort of things. Comment down below if you want to hear him again, and for those on Spotify, you can't comment, but thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please hit the notification bell, as that really helps. I don't know how, because I don't do the YouTube thing, but I hear a lot of other YouTubers say it, so cool.
He could have plugged his link there as well, but never mind.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for listening. Bye.